Hello, everybody. Today is July 5th, 2023. Today's a Wednesday, 4 o'clock. Lewis here. I am back from my hiatus away. Glad to be back. Yesterday, got some new news regarding East Palestine. If you haven't seen some of that video was posted yesterday. We had another one posted today. And later in the show, we're actually going to be joined by Melissa Mays of Flint. Many of you on the channel will be very familiar with some of her work, interviews between her and Jordan. I had the pleasure of meeting Melissa during my second or third reporting trip in East Palestine. She's going to be going over with me some of the specifics of the Stafford Act. That is essentially the umbrella under which governors who are asking for federal assistance with a disaster, as in the case of East Palestine, that's Governor Mike DeWine reaching out with this disaster declaration in East Palestine, asking the Biden administration to approve it. Some of the question marks as to why they are choosing to go with a natural disaster, with a disaster declaration versus a state of emergency. A little bit unclear as to why that decision was being made when, from what we're looking into, it seems like those are only applicable in natural disasters, although I have found one instance where it is not the case. So we'll be getting into that in the second half of the show. But first, we're going to be starting with this UPS negotiations going on between the Teamsters Union and UPS Corporate. This has been kind of something that's been looming for a while now. Workers have been expressing their demands, and we're going to be joined by a TDU member, Matt Leichenger. I'm apologizing right now for saying the last name wrong. We'll get it correct in a second here. We're going to start off here with the message from the UPS Teamsters strike here. So, Colin, we can go ahead and pull up that tweet. After marathon sessions, UPS negotiations collapse. Around 4 a.m., UPS walked away from the bargaining table after presenting an unacceptable offer to the Teamsters that did not address members' needs. The UPS Teamsters National Negotiating Committee unanimously rejected the package. Following the marathon negotiations, UPS refused to give the Teamsters a last, best, and final offer, telling the union that the company had nothing more to give. This multi-billion-dollar corporation has plenty to give American workers. They just don't want to, the Teamsters General President, Sean M. O'Brien, said. UPS had a choice to make, and they have clearly chosen to go down the wrong road. The UPS Teamsters contract, covering more than 340,000 full and part-time workers, expires July 31st. No additional negotiations are scheduled. The Teamsters have repeatedly made clear that UPS members will not work beyond the expiration of the current contract. In June, rank-and-file UPS Teamsters authorized a strike by an overwhelming 97%. Matt, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time. Apologies for the butchering of the last name there. Did not check that box off before we got started here. I guess, what is your initial reaction to this news coming out early this morning?
Yeah, totally. It was the first thing I saw when I woke up. Wake up, go on my phone, see already in WhatsApp chats this tweet that's been being sent around, and I was pretty surprised. I thought that we were going to see a TA where most of our demands were going to be met, actually, today. That's what my feeling was last night, but I was surprised and, if anything, just immediately motivated to continue to build our strike threat and get even more ready. We're scheduled to have a practice picket at my building in Brooklyn tomorrow, actually. So obviously the message was relayed to my coworkers, and it's just, look, this is getting very serious. It's time to continue to escalate and continue to build our strike threat.
Absolutely. And, I'll say I was a little bit surprised as well. It almost seemed like over the weekend, like some progress had potentially been made. I saw some fairly positive messaging coming out on kind of both sides, or the Teamsters were putting out some good messages saying that, you all had kind of won a couple concessions. It seems like, one of the asks, it seems like a pretty basic thing, is air conditioning inside of the trucks. Obviously, I'm here in Austin, Texas. Basically the last 3 weeks, it's been 100 degrees outside every day. You can magnify that times quite a bit more inside of a vehicle, I would imagine. It sounds like that had been worked in, but right now it seems like a lot of the issues are coming over pay. So I was a little bit surprised to see that. Do you have any insight as to what you think the potential hangups are on now? Obviously, I know you're not negotiating directly in this or anything like that, but what are your thoughts on what some of the hangups might be?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, just because we have reached a number of TAs so far doesn't mean that everything's been taken care of. What I know is that
just for folks who might not know, TAs.
It's a tentative agreement.
Thank you.
So tentative because ultimately all of the tentative agreements are going to be put forth to the membership, UPS drivers and warehouse workers to vote on, to approve. Mm-hmm. So yeah, TA is a tentative agreement. There's a lot in our contract. Our contract is over 200 pages long. There's a lot to deal with, and everything, even if it's what's considered a sort of non-economic proposal or issue, still ultimately is economic. I mean, it's going to cost money, for example, to put air conditioning in trucks, right? Everything costs money, but the things that cost the most money are things like wages or, pension, stuff like that. And I'm pretty certain at this point, what's really the hang up is really around those big money questions. That's really what it's coming down to. And that's really ultimately what UPS, of course, is going to be the most hung up about, and what we're going to be most hung up about.
Right. So, and can understand that to a degree, but it seems like to me that, and correct me if I'm wrong here, the last kind of contract was signed about 5 years ago or so. Am I wrong there?
Well, so the contracts last 5 years. Okay. It was extended, but.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So, but the last time this was done, essentially, this was pre-COVID. Obviously, we've seen a massive surge in, online shopping, ordering, and that directly reflected in UPS's own financial situation. Colin, we can pull up the adjusted profits from UPS earnings, that orange bar graph, and we can look here directly at the major difference in what the profit was for UPS before COVID. Fast forwarding to now, Colin, it should be it's below Matt's COVID tweet on the doc here, Reuters link. But we'll give him a second to try to pull that up. But basically, what it shows is in 2019, $8.2 billion is the I want to pull up the correct figure here. Adjusted profit, $8.2 billion. Fast forward to 2022, and that is $13.9 billion. That has continued to go up, as we can see on the graph here. They've got the extra money to spend. They've been bringing in more money. Obviously, we live in a capitalist society, unfortunately, and that's how things need to go. But it seems like if you're jumping from 8.2 billion to 13.9 billion, there's certainly going to be a little bit of wiggle room to make sure that the essential workers that all these big corporations, government officials, everybody were also happy to, give their thoughts and prayers towards during the pandemic, to actually pay them fairly. Seems to me like there's some room and some wiggle room there. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's not only about wiggle room, but it's also realizing that these profits were generated because there was such high demand on the logistics industry during the pandemic. There was a surge in demand because so many people went home and they had things delivered directly to their homes. Mm-hmm. But that change in workflow didn't exist for UPS Teamsters or other warehouse and delivery workers. And so while we were required to continue to work in the warehouse or on the truck, we were risking our lives unvaccinated at the beginning while getting people their essential goods. And that demand translated to higher profits for the company, but nothing was given back to the workers. In fact, conditions in the warehouse got worse. There were health risks just by going to work. But not only that, the volume increased so intensely, trucks were completely blown out. That's like the term that we use when a UPS truck is just full of packages to the point of when you open the back door, packages are spilling out the back. That was like the condition that we dealt with the conditions we dealt with during the pandemic.
Right. And Colin, we can pull up the tweet of Matt talking about some of this that he put out earlier today in regards to the COVID pandemic. I mean, notably, UPS drivers were actually delivering COVID vaccines during this. And to your point, you couldn't get a vaccination at that point, but you all were out there, especially at that point in time. We knew very, very little about all of this and everything that was going on, and really risking it to go out and make sure that vaccines were being delivered to healthcare facilities across the country. Obviously at the time there was lots of verbal praise and whatnot for doing this. You might have gotten a little bit of a bump during that. I'm not even sure. But now, and you're shaking your head no, so it sounds like you weren't. You're expected to go in there and do that. You're talking about trucks being filled to the point when you open them up, there are literally packages falling out the other side. And that is the reality of what you all were working through with little to no increase in pay, it sounds like. Obviously, if you all were to go on strike, there would be massive impacts here. I mean, UPS, according to UPS themselves, they say that they are transporting about 6% of the nation's GDP on a daily basis and more than 3% of the global GDP. I'm going to go ahead and read a little bit about what an expert who is the vice president of supply chain and customs policy from the National Retail Federation has said. Colin, you can pull up the Hill article, The Impacts of a Strike. In that article, Jonathan Gold, vice president of supply chain and customs policy at the National Retail Federation, said a UPS Teamsters strike could produce a significant disruption. He pointed to supply chain issues experienced during the pandemic as an example. Quote, "You'd have supply chain disruptions like we witnessed during the pandemic, potentially where you wouldn't be getting your deliveries," Gold said. "So those who are relying on next day, 2-day delivery of whatever you buy online or somewhere else potentially cannot be delivered." Gold said it also could be difficult for other shipping companies to carry the extra burden in the event of a disruption, noting the, quote, "capacity of other carriers to pick up where UPS isn't able to is not that easy." Quote, "It's not as if you can just quickly turn to another company. The question is what capacity is available to make that shift," he said, "and it's unclear if there's capacity elsewhere to make up for that." So with all that being said, it seems like to me there's been some positive support amongst folks for you all. What has the reaction been from the general public, from neighbors, from politicians to you all actually elevating this to the next step, which is striking at this point?
Yeah, I mean, it obviously depends on who you talk to. That being said, I would say my experience is that the general public is very much on our side. I mean, we see it, I think, in the press, on Twitter recently. I've seen a lot of politicians coming out in support of us. And, this support is also part of our strike threat. It's important for everyone to show which side they're on, because if it comes to it, and it's not that we want to cause a disruption in the economy. It's not like that is the aim that we're seeking. The aim that we're seeking is to have a fair contract, right? And if the only way to earn that is through a work stoppage, as Sean O'Brien continues to say, UPS is going to do that to themselves, and the public needs to understand that UPS is going to be doing that to the U.S. economy. We have demands that we know that UPS can meet financially, and UPS needs to deliver on those demands instead of continuing to reward their shareholders, continuing to reward Wall Street, right?
No,
this fight, if you boil it down, take the brand name out of it, UPS is owned by major companies like Vanguard and BlackRock, Wall Street firms that own trillions of dollars of assets. And when you just look at this fight, it's between working class Americans and Wall Street. Mm-hmm. Who's getting the share of the wealth that's been produced through the pandemic? Is it going to go to the major shareholders in BlackRock and Vanguard who are going to spend that extra money on what? A 7th house, an 8th house, a new Bentley, a Rolls Royce? Right. Or is it going to go to offer a dignified living for a part-time worker who's going to work at 4 a.m. in the morning to move those vaccines and get them onto those package cars so that a driver can then take it to a hospital or a pharmacy, and so they can go back home at night and be able to feed their family and have a dignified life? That's what this fight is about. And when you break it down in those terms and you talk to anyone on the street, they will understand that causing a disruption at the scale of a UPS strike is a just thing to do. And ultimately, it's for the greater good.
No, absolutely. And UPS has had plenty of time. I mean, you all have been very clear. The Teamsters have been very clear about this deadline. So this is, and I'll use your own words right there. This is UPS choosing this action. This is UPS choosing this disruption, is what it seems at least, because the lines have been pretty clear about what you all are looking for. The deadlines have been pretty clear, and UPS is ultimately deciding that they're gonna go the hard way, seemingly, and it's very likely gonna. I mean, this is gonna have impacts on not only UPS's bottom line, but on workers, on people across the country. But yeah, I agree. I think people are generally, the folks I'm speaking to are supportive of this, and as they should be, because as you point out, and I've talked about this a lot. I've done a lot of coverage on the East Palestine rail derailment and ensuement of what's gone on there. Norfolk Southern, massive corporation, also owned by several of the same big banks that you're talking about here, Vanguard, BlackRock. These huge companies and the people who run them, to your point, don't need a seventh car or another vacation home or anything like that. Let's talk about making sure that everyday people don't need to work 2-3 jobs. Everyday people can afford to pay rent, or maybe, I can't even think about it this myself, buy a home. That seems like it should be something pretty easy to do, but right now, for a lot of people across the country, it's virtually impossible. I want to get into a little bit about, I guess, some of the complaints and issues that maybe you're experiencing, some of your coworkers are experiencing, that led to this overwhelming 97% vote in favor to strike. If you want to talk a little bit about what exactly it is you do at UPS and some of the issues maybe you see and some of your coworkers see, I think that would be helpful for folks.
Sure. So I'm a 22-4, which is the second tier driver position that was created in the last contract. And this has been one of the major issues in our contract fight. Actually, the other day, we did reach a TA that eliminated the 22-4 position, which, as you mentioned earlier, was one of the signs of real progress and sort of a triumph in this contract fight. However, that has been a point of major frustration for a lot of my coworkers, obviously, because it makes up 25%, or it's 25% of the total number of regular package car drivers is like the maximum number of 22-4s you can have in a building. So we're talking about a pretty significant chunk of drivers. And we are doing the same job as regular package car drivers for less money, and we have fewer rights over things like excessive overtime, protections against excessive overtime, as well as we can't put in like request loads for an 8-hour day. It's a similar thing to sort of excessive overtime. We're basically a more flexible and cheaper driver option. And so among, my immediate coworkers of other 22-4s, this was a major point of frustration and has been a major point of frustration for as long as I've been working at UPS. But that's only one part of this whole contract. I mean,
right.
So also, of course, you have a huge issue, which is part-time pay. And this is all, of course, taking place within the landscape of the broader economy, where we've seen inflation through the roof. And so we've seen inflation through the roof, and we've seen corporations making historic profits. However, our wages, we're dealing with things like a second-tier pay rate, and we're dealing with like part-time poverty, while corporations are hoarding an incredible amount of wealth, and prices in the grocery store are going way up. And so there's issues that are as basic as just pay and being able to afford basic goods. And then there's also excessive overtime, not being able to spend time with your family. A big issue, which we have also won in a TA, is air conditioning, because as the climate continues to get warmer, we're dealing with that without air conditioning in our jobs. I mean, the list goes on. There's so many issues that need to be dealt with.
Yeah, and something that caught my eye, I forget where I saw it. I saw somebody else in an interview earlier this week discussing UPS is kind of set up essentially, and somebody in the chat just mentioned it as well, like an equivalent of like an Uber driver or something for delivering packages, where you've got a flexible schedule, or you can like sign up to pick up packages on a certain day. How has that kind of affected everything? Obviously, like gig worker type economy it's going to hurt the people doing it. I understand why people do it because of the flexibility, or if you're in between jobs or something like that, you need to make money somehow. It is a good little stopgap measure for folks, but you have essentially like zero protections from anything. You're kind of just like, once you start, I mean, I've in between jobs before. I've driven for Uber years ago. I've done that sort of thing, and it's it can fill the gap, but it's not a sustainable long-term thing for most people. Is that something you've seen quite a bit of in your experience at UPS? How does that kind of play into all of this?
Yes. So there's something called the personal vehicle driver, or PVD, which is something that the company has been utilizing during peak season, which is essentially like the Christmas season. And what they're doing is they're hiring, yes, basically these like seasonal employees to drive personal cars, and they come and take packages off of our trucks and then deliver them out of their personal cars. Now, these are not union members, they're seasonal employees, but they are handling volume, which means that, like the union is not gaining more members as a result of like an increase in volume at this time. Right. And so it has been an issue where people, some people do want the overtime, especially during peak season. There is a lot of money to be made. So for union members, some union members want to have a choice of whether or not they can have that extra overtime instead of being relieved by what a lot of my coworkers kind of see as like scabs in
Right.
In this kind of way, because they're not union members. We're basically seeing union density like in the industry declining. I think that's what we're seeing with these personal vehicle drivers. And it's become very trendy in the industry because of the boom in e-commerce and because of competitors like Amazon, where people and consumers have become so used to just instantly receiving the things that they order online without even having an understanding of the fact that there are humans doing hard physical labor to get things from internet to your house. Right. It's not like a magic process. There is a whole, there is a lot of labor that goes into it, but consumers have become addicted to it largely because corporations like Amazon and now UPS, in order to compete with Amazon, are making this the norm. And so corporations will sell these positions as flexible, and they seek employees by putting out advertisements. They do this with part-time too. Wouldn't you love to just, get a little cash on the side to have a part-time job? That's not the reality. The reality is that people get these jobs because they need the money to survive, and this is the best that they can get. Right. I mean, go around and really find me like people who would choose to do Uber on the side, or Amazon Flex on the side, or be a personal vehicle driver on the side just for fun if we lived in a society where people's basic needs were met. I really I'm trying to imagine a society where people's basic needs are met, that they would also go do Uber or Amazon Flex or something like that for fun. That's not what people would do, in my personal opinion.
Agreed. But based on, I see those ads that you're talking about. Based on that, DoorDash does the same thing. Like, they make it like, oh, do you want to figure out how to pay for your groceries for free? Like, just sign up with, and it's the same thing. They're essentially, it's not this like happy-go-lucky kind of thing. It's, nope, I'm in a spot, I have to do this, so I'm going to do it. And to your point, yes, if we lived in a functioning society where people's basic needs were met, we wouldn't have to be having a lot of this conversation surrounding this. I guess as we kind of look forward here to, right now, it seems like August 1st would be day one of this potential strike. I guess it's kind of speculation from you at this point, but do you think that there's anything that can prevent this from happening at this point, or do you think that this is the path that we've gone down, and at this point there may be no off ramp? I know you're talking about, and I've seen on Twitter and other places images of practice strikes and whatnot already happening, practice picket lines already happening. What do you think is going to happen over the next couple weeks as we get closer to this August 1st date?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to say. The thing that will prevent a strike is UPS meeting our demands. I think that's been made very clear by our bargaining committee, and that's really like the path that UPS will have to take if they want to avoid, as Sean O'Brien continues to say, if they want to avoid striking themselves, if they want to avoid causing this major disruption to happen to the U.S. economy. So UPS will need to basically call the bargaining committee and say, okay, we're ready to negotiate on your terms, and we're ready to meet XYZ terms. Let's get back to the bargaining table. In the meantime, we're going to continue to build our strike threat, continue to get people ready, as much as we can, continue to build that community support, public support from politicians, so that come August 1st, if UPS strikes themselves, we're gonna crush them, and we're gonna have not only our own bargaining unit, prepared, but we're gonna have so much support on our side that UPS is gonna have to cave it to our demands at that point. Whether or not UPS decides to be smart about it and meet our demands before that happens, it's not up to me. It's up to them, right? So all I can do at this point is continue to talk to my coworkers and let them know, hey, listen, we have to continue to get ready to exercise our right to strike. That's what it's going to come down to.
Absolutely. Well, Matt, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I guess, is there anywhere folks can kind of look to stay up to date with what's going on here, ways that folks can kind of help support you all? Sure.
I mean, just immediately off the top of my head, if you want to stay up to date with what's going on, follow the Teamsters account on Twitter. Mm-hmm. That's where I'm getting a lot of my updates, other than the UPS Teamsters app, but that's more for members. So I would say follow the Teamsters on Twitter. And if you want to get some cool gear, go to the TDU shop, and you can get like a cool shirt like this or something. And it helps, support our rank and file network.
Awesome. Well, Matt, thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate it. Folks, if you start to see in your local communities some of these strikes happening, other events happening, be sure to keep an eye out and see if there's ways you might be able to get involved. Matt, thank you so much. Really appreciate your time.
Well, thank you.
Awesome. So big thanks again to Matt there for joining us. This is definitely a story that Status Coup is going to stay on. We'll definitely be sure, and I know Jordan interviewed a former UPS employee earlier this week that's on the channel. I'll definitely look to stay in touch with Matt as this story continues to develop, if he's got anything going on in his local area. This is a story that Status Coup will absolutely cover on the ground if this strike does happen. I'm here in Austin, Texas. There's absolutely going to be some actions here if this goes on. We've got Tina Desiree Berg out in Los Angeles. I'm sure she'll be on the ground there doing this. We've got John Farina in New York City, Jordan as well in the Northeast. So this is a story that we want to stay on. And if it gets to the point where, UPS essentially chooses the strike going on here, we'll be there to do it. The way to make sure that we're able to actually be on the ground in these places is by becoming a member. StatusCoup.com/join is the best place to do that. StatusCoup.com/join for literally as low as $5 to $10 a month. If you're able to do it, it's like the cost of a cup of coffee at a local coffee shop. It's the cost of a beer at happy hour. If you're able to do it once a month, it might not sound like a lot, but when hundreds and hundreds of people all do it, it makes a difference and has enabled trips like Tina being able to go cover some of the Cop City protests, not once, but twice. It's enabled me to get back to East Palestine 3 times in the last couple months. It's allowed Jordan to continue reporting in Flint for literally years and years and years. as well as continued reporting there and in Kalamazoo. So membership is absolutely the way to be able to do all of that. Hopefully soon we'll be joined by Melissa Mays from Flint, speaking of Flint, where we'll go over some of this stuff with the Stafford Act. I'm probably going to start to get into it a little bit here, just so that we can keep the ball rolling. So we'll get into the introduction of it, and then when Melissa joins, we'll ask her some of the specifics of what her experience is with this, as well as what her take is on the difference between the natural disaster declaration or the disaster declaration versus the emergency. Also, we've got about 150 people watching. Please smash the like button down below. It helps get this out to more folks. We really, really appreciate it. Also, I mentioned the Stop Cop City protests. There's going to be a lot of new content that maybe you missed over the long weekend. So definitely be sure to check that out, because Tina and John were just there for, I don't even know how long it was, because I was getting back from my trip, but they were on the ground in Atlanta again for several days, covering the protests going on there. So if you haven't seen some of that stuff, definitely go back, check it out, and make sure you're up to date on everything that is going on there. But without further ado, officially, on July 3rd, the evening of July 3rd, Governor Mike DeWine of Ohio, who yours truly had the pleasure of speaking with, although I don't know if it was a pleasure, did actually do something in regards to East Palestine, actually requesting a disaster declaration. Colin, we can go ahead and pull that up on the screen. So right here from Mike DeWine, you can scroll down a little bit. We'll read just the first couple paragraphs here. So on March 7th, the state of Ohio was granted an extension until July 3rd, 2023 to request a major presidential disaster declaration relating to the train derailment and release of hazardous chemicals that occurred in East Palestine, Ohio from February 3rd, 2023 through February 6th, 2023. On June 13th, 2023, the state of Ohio requested additional time from the Federal Emergency Management Agency to request a major presidential disaster declaration as the state continues to evaluate long-term needs. This request was denied by FEMA on June 29th, 2023. So that request being the extension was denied. Currently, no unmet needs have been reported to the state. Bullshit. However, this is due to the voluntary actions of Norfolk Southern. The possibility remains that the voluntary support provided by Norfolk Southern could at some point in the future cease. And this declaration is needed to ensure that the state and federal government use all resources available to step in and provide the community with needed assistance. Therefore, under the provisions of Section 401 of the Robert T. Stafford Disaster Relief and Emergency Assistance Act, and implemented by 44 CFR, I request that you declare a major disaster for the state of Ohio as a result of the unprecedented train derailment and release of hazardous chemicals in East Palestine, Ohio on February 3rd, 2023. So that is the actual request, essentially, from Mike DeWine to the Biden administration requesting this federal relief. Again, if you'll remember, I actually don't have the clip ready. I should have done it. If you remember way back when in February, I actually asked Governor DeWine about asking for federal relief and not responding, and he lied to me saying, I didn't say that I didn't return the phone call, sort of thing. So obviously some issues there, but actually kind of going through and making the request formally here. And it looks like Melissa is joining us here now. Colin, if Melissa's all set, awesome. Can you hear me okay, Melissa?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you so much for joining us. So just to get you up to speed, I did just read through DeWine's official request for the disaster declaration. A line that stood out to me before we get into kind of some of the Stafford Act stuff here was that there are currently no unmet needs in East Palestine. Would you believe that, Melissa? No unmet needs. Everything's all fine and dandy in East Palestine.
Everything is fine. And the reason why that is so important, and I mean, that even trumps, and I really hate using that word now, but it trumps the Stafford Act, because whether you're filing for a federal disaster or a federal emergency, there has to be a need. What you're doing is saying that state and local agencies have exhausted all efforts to deal with this problem, right? And they need federal assistance, federal agencies to come in and fill those gaps. What he's saying, what DeWine is saying, is that there are no unmet needs because Norfolk Southern, in their grand generosity, is volunteering. But yet his concern is that they could pull out at any time. Well, then why are you allowing the poisoners to be in charge of the recovery?
Right.
That it makes no sense. It makes zero sense whatsoever. So yeah, there's multiple reasons why this is just a PR stunt and getting the hopes of the residents up, which shame on him and his administration to do this. I mean, I get it. Shame doesn't work for folks like that. But the fact that people are like, oh my God, because I was getting text messages, people were saying, oh my God, we're going to get it. You know, he finally declared or requested, you know, what is this going to do for us? And then I read through his DeWine's request and was like, not a damn thing.
Right. Yeah. And it's ridiculous too, because like, even if you were to be like, yep, you know, Norfolk Southern is handling some of this, and like, to be fair, they are doing, they're doing a couple things, right? They're making people jump through a million hoops to get it. They're making people feel terrible about asking for the help that they deserve in this case, because it's not their own fault for being there. But they are actually providing some financial assistance to folks to be able to relocate and whatnot. But let's talk about the things that they are not providing. If you're happy with the level of support Norfolk Southern is giving, I'm not, but maybe DeWine is in some weird world, then let's talk about the things that aren't being met, because I've looked extensively into this, and one area that's definitely not being met is sufficient residential air testing, like indoor air testing. And this isn't just coming from me. I don't have the tweet here, but Dr. Andrew Welton, who we've talked about his kind of investigations into a lot of this quite a bit on the channel, even just about a week ago was saying that there still hasn't been real indoor air testing done. I reported on that back in March, that the devices that were being used aren't sufficient. So that's one unmet need. There are other countless numbers of other unmet needs when it comes to urine testing, blood testing, that people are needing to pay out of pocket for in a lot of cases. In many cases, had to jump through a bunch of hoops to be able to get it in the first place. Residents in Pennsylvania that I've spoken with are having a hard time getting access to water testing unless they pay for it out of pocket on their own. Obviously, this is Ohio, not Pennsylvania, but there are plenty of unmet needs being there. And if you're the governor of Ohio, to your point, and you actually want this to get approved, just outline some of those needs. When you say there's no needs, I don't think the Biden administration was probably going to do anything anyway, but like, what are you expecting them to do if you're telling them there's nothing that you need from them?
And the Biden administration would be able to file or approve a declaration of emergency. So that is the step down. The difference, of course, is man-made versus natural. I mean, if there's a flood, tornado, yeah, you get your disaster declaration.
Right. Actually, Colin, can we pull that up? Actually, the Stafford Act definitions link, just so that we can be clear for folks. So we've got the difference. So an emergency, an occasion or instance for which, in the determination of the president, federal assistance is needed to supplement state, tribal, and local efforts and capabilities to save the lives and protect property and public health and safety, or lessen or avert the threat of a catastrophe in any part of the United States, versus a major disaster, which is what DeWine is actually asking for just below. Any natural catastrophe, including any hurricane, tornado, storm, high water, wind-driven water, tidal wave, tsunami, earthquake, volcanic eruption, landslide, mudslide, snowstorm, or drought. I don't know about you, Melissa, but I'm pretty sure that a train derailment and then the poor decision to explode the derailed train in a small town is not natural.
No. I mean, we tried, we begged for this in Flint, even though we knew we weren't going to get it, because we didn't choose to switch our water. The government decided to do that. We didn't choose to not treat our water. The government decided to do that. But with us, we wanted out of the hands of the state, because the state of Michigan and the city of Flint, to a lesser extent, are who did this to us. So we wanted the federal government to come in and be in charge, because in no way, shape, or form could we trust the people who did the damage to properly report the damage, but also give us any kind of a recovery. And that's why the Flint water crisis has gone on this long. It should not have taken, it should not take over 9 years to replace plumbing. It's really not that difficult. So we asked for it and begged for it, because we would rather have had, and we petitioned for this starting in 2015 for the EPA to come in and take primacy over the state, because the state was the guilty party, and we had caught them lying. Now, we caught them lying on the water test, we caught them lying on a bunch of stuff, so that helped us get some authority in for the EPA for a limited amount of time. However, in order to request, and we had to, it started locally. We got former Mayor Karen Weaver in, and she declared a local state of emergency. Then we had to go up to the county, the state, and then, we forced former Governor Rick Snyder to ask Obama for a disaster. He went to disaster, even though there was no way it was going to work,
Right.
To buy himself more time, because in order to even apply, the FEMA rules state that you need to do a full damages inventory. So tell me what guilty party is actually going to be thorough and honest with the damages that they helped create. Right. They're not, because they're going to worry about lawsuits and settlements and this and this and that. They're not going to, which is why this whole thing has been a joke since February, and I called it out in February when DeWine was talking about, let me think about this, we need more time to assess. No, you don't. You know what, happened, and you know that you need to go through these damages inventories.
Right. And in Flint, there would have, there's an excuse because, to your point, they're not going to, go through and incriminate themselves. It's not a good excuse, right? But in East Palestine, there really shouldn't be an excuse because, if you're a good faith governor who actually wants to do well by the people in East Palestine, you're going to be like, okay, let's go through and list out all this shit real clear and put it in the declaration and send it off right away. There's no excuse.
Who doesn't want this larger pot of money to come in, the federal government to come in and help fix what in no way, shape, or form has their state been able to do? Their state agencies have said, no way, we don't have the staff, the equipment, the money, the budget, none of this. We need help. But then Norfolk Southern's like, oh, in the goodness of our heart, because, oh my God, this is so terrible, we'll handle it all. And okay, and if anybody's gone back and watched Erin Brockovich, I actually just watched it with my kids again to refresh it and stuff. One of the biggest things was PG&E, the electric company that was poisoning the water, was paying for the doctor visits and paying to buy these houses from people. When the guilty parties are in charge of the recovery, you will not have one. And it looks like DeWine and Norfolk Southern are like this because if he did a damages inventory, what would that show? People that are sick. It goes past a half a mile radius. It goes into other states, and that's a big federal when that is and it's a crime, especially when you're seeing that these things could have been prevented. The entire disaster in East Palestine could have been prevented. And so of course they're worried about criminally liable, they're worried about their stockholders and all this stuff, and being financially liable even though they're worth billions, and that's fine. But the thing is DeWine's not going to do a damages inventory because, one, obviously it's going to expose the actual damage and how little the state has actually done. So now they're being incriminating themselves. They're saying, oh no, we've got this. No, you don't got this. Because people are sick. People can't get the right testing. People can't get the right help. You're not cleaning people's homes out. You're not helping people live healthy and recover from this. So then they're going to have to tell the federal government, oh, nope, we've done literally next to nothing for these folks, except left them in the hands of the folks who did this to them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, everything you said, especially, comparing it sounds eerily familiar. I mean, that's exactly what is happening in East Palestine, where you have the company who caused it being the one who is paying, just like in the movie Erin Brockovich, right? The PG&E was paying for the doctor bills. Norfolk Southern's not necessarily paying for doctor bills, but they are paying for the relocation. They're giving people, some people are getting money for some things. They're dividing everybody up into different groups, trying to pit people against each other. You've got different factions of town who are on one side or another side. And fortunately, there are some great organizers in town who are doing a great job of bridging that gap in a lot of cases. And they're gaining some steam, continuing to gain steam. But it's got to become frustrating when you're going up, these government officials who are supposed to be looking out for you. But when the reality is those government officials are, number one, stockholders in a lot of these companies, whether it be Norfolk Southern or one of the massive companies that own them, BlackRock, Vanguard, JP Morgan. So the governor's got some instance of that, as well as receiving donations from Norfolk Southern. But you've also got the U.S. Senate hearing that happened about this months ago. I can't remember the specific number, but I want to say it was 13 of the 19 senators on the stage owned stock in those companies, and it was more than that. I think it was 18 of 19 had received donations from those companies, and it's like, how are these people supposed to be the ones who are going to regulate this moving forward.
Right.
It's
That's
obvious.
the big R word. That's the no. That's the thing, is like they should recuse themselves. But of course, it's the bigger issue of pulling money out of politics, because then you'd have them actually governing based on what they're supposed to be doing and listening to their constituents instead of their donors and their funders and where they've got their stock,
Right.
and where they've got their investments. But here we are showing, profit over people again. And it's every single time, and I actually did talk to Erin about this. You see this over and over and over again with all the disasters she's been in for decades. And I'm seeing it over and over and over again for the past 9 years with Flint. It's money comes first. The investors come first. They're doing everything they can to shut us up about the water, because businesses downtown don't like the hit they take when people don't want to drink the water there. And money would have to go to help the rest of the city instead of just going to downtown. And this happened in Detroit. It happened in Benton Harbor, and it's happening in all of these cities. In Jackson, money comes before people, and as long as money remains in politics, we can't even get legislation through that will help stop that or change the way that this is done. Like, you should not be able to sit on a committee if you have financial interest in any way, shape, or form with the type of companies that are coming forward. So it's all common sense. That's the dumbest part about all of this. It's all common sense, but also, you break it, you buy it, or fix it. What you need to do. You've harmed people. You've changed these people's lives forever. You've altered their DNA. You've altered how their body works. You've altered everything. They can't live safely in their homes, and you can't even tell them it's safe or not. Just like in Flint, they're not testing for all the contaminants. They're like, oh, well, lead this. And I just looked at our latest quality confidence report, and it says, oh, we're not in violation of the law, but lead tests did range from 0 to 795 parts per billion. So, yikes. But that's okay, because we're fine. We're telling you we're fine. Trust us. We're the people that did this in the first place. And that's what's happening here. Is Norfolk Southern is paying for a lot of the doctors, and they are telling the doctors what they can and can't say. But then they're also telling the state what they can and can't say, and the health department what they can and can't say. And here you go. So it's disgustingly similar to what we're going through in Flint. And so the biggest thing is to call this out. To call this out as the BS PR stunt that it is. Basically, DeWine's like, well, I kept asking for this extension so I could think about it. Think about what? Something you knew for a fact that in no way would you qualify for. So you could have just stepped back and then requested a federal emergency declaration.
And I think that, I think that's what makes most sense. I'm curious your thoughts on this. I found it like a half an hour before we got started. I was like, are there instances where there was a not natural disaster that happened that was approved? And I found one from about 10 years ago, weirdly. Colin, can you pull up the let's just do the Reuters article of the example of a non-natural disaster. I think that's it. Yep. So the Obama, let me find the right spot here. So second paragraph down, the Federal Emergency Management Agency declines to issue a disaster declaration in June on the grounds that the state resources were adequate to help the community of 2,800 rebuild, but FEMA now says it will make federal funding available to state and eligible local governments and certain private nonprofit organizations for emergency work, as well as to repair or replace public facilities damaged by the explosion. The approval of the state's appeal for a major disaster declaration is great and welcome news for the people of West Texas, Texas Governor Rick Perry said in a statement. Further down, it says disaster declarations are generally issued in response to natural catastrophes such as storms or floods that affect a wide area. The FEMA decision means the city of West will qualify for federal funding to help public works entities get rebuilt. Josh Havens, Perry's deputy press secretary, told Reuters. So maybe there is, I hope that there's a glimmer of hope here, but I'm not convinced, because this was with a fertilizer, for the context for folks, this was a fertilizer factory in West Texas that exploded, essentially. So I
would think in his appeal, so he still didn't get the full disaster declaration, but he did get FEMA money to rebuild, public and private. So that is an appeal, and he got more of an emergency. So, which still isn't the full-fledged, like all of the agencies coming in to do all these things.
And to be fair, too, he did say that there were needs that were unmet, where you've got freaking DeWine in the other case. Right.
You won't get a penny, because the whole point, because of states' rights, you can't just have the federal government. Now, in my mind, because this crosses state lines into Pennsylvania and, of course, blowing into other states, but for certain Pennsylvania, this shouldn't be what, and also Pennsylvania's governor and attorney general want help, right? But it all lays on DeWine's shoulders because it happens in Ohio. But to me, states' rights shouldn't matter here because one state's poisoning another. But the whole thing was that you don't want the federal government trampling on your rights. Now, they'll take the money in case there's a tornado. You watch this hypocrisy. You don't want the federal government trampling in and being like, hey, we're coming here to fix this problem because you're not doing good enough, which is necessary in so many instances. But they don't want that. So that's where the Stafford Act came in place, and that's where states' rights comes into play. But in this case, in no way can a state address this. Otherwise, they would have already, and people will be living safely in their homes, and this will be cleaned up already. But because the explosion was unnecessary, and there's still so many questions on what was exploded, and then also what happens when those different exploding chemicals mix in the air, in the soil, and how long it got to the water. It didn't take very long at all. And then when rain happened, storms, tornadoes, all that stuff, nobody's tracking it. They said, okay, we're going to look at this little half a mile radius, and that's it. And we're going to just pretend we don't see anything else.
The magic bubble. There's a magic 1 mile bubble. Mm-hmm.
It's a magic invisible wall that just keeps it right there. So weather can't touch it. And, it's just perfectly, just like when they did the testing for the Easter egg hunt on the park. Here's these 14 spots. Well, you can step in those probably. Just don't dig. But the rest of the park, no. Just these little spots here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and if I remember correctly, with that Easter egg hunt results, the results were littered with these are like estimates. This is close. It's not like it's within this wiggle room. Like I remember there being letters all over it. I think you had pointed that out to us.
Equipment and the state's equipment. They said right there, the state's equipment. Their equipment couldn't even get proper numbers because they didn't test that type of contaminant or at those types of levels. And I'm like, okay, that should, if there's asterisks and little letters behind all of your and excuses for why you can't get proper, levels. First of all, you can't say it's safe. Second of all, oh my God. I mean, yes. So basically the state, and also at the end of the day, none of the agencies have had control. Norfolk Southern has had control this entire time. And yes, if they got a federal state of emergency, the EPA and FEMA would be coming in and saying, okay, here's where the money needs to go. Here's how people can get money to get help. Here's where they can get medical care. So they don't want that. They do not want to take the control away from Norfolk Southern. And it looks like DeWine is just constantly covering for his buddies. I mean, look how many months it's been already that he's been buying time, not buying time for him to think about something, to file for something in no way, shape, or form do they qualify for. What he's doing is buying time for Norfolk Southern to cover it up. Because if and when the time comes where the federal government or somebody else comes in and actually does a proper damages inventory, it's going to be bad. So he's basically buying time for Norfolk Southern to cover up as much as possible, as quickly as possible, in my opinion.
Agreed. And as time goes on, it seems to get worse. And folks watching right now, please smash the like button to help get this out to more folks. Super chats are welcome. I will read all of them at the end. So please, if you want to do that, that's a great way you can help us out. And we did learn even more about this just a couple weeks ago now during the NTSB hearings that came out, where seemingly Norfolk Southern was told by the owners of the vinyl chloride themselves, or the people who manufactured the vinyl chloride, not once, not twice, but 3 times, that they didn't think that there was any chance that there was going to be an explosion, no imminent threat of explosion, polymerization wasn't happening, and Norfolk Southern not only ignored that advice, but they didn't share it with the Unified Command, which was the group of people who were making the decision. That's where, Norfolk Southern CEO has kind of been like, oh, the fire chief made the decision. He was the head of Unified Command. And yes, on paper, he was the one who had to be like, yes, yes, I make the decision. But there were, reports of upwards of 40 people in the room. And how can they make that decision when they don't have all of the information? If the information that the fire chief had is Norfolk Southern saying these cars are going to blow at any moment and your town is going to be leveled for a mile, then I mean you're putting the guy in a pretty shitty situation, frankly. He hasn't dealt
not,
with this before,
he's not
but
a chemical expert, nor is he a
right,
burn expert. He said that 100 times.
right.
He believed what they told him, which was your whole town's going to be gone. You have to do this. Now this man gets to live with this guilt that it didn't have to happen, but nobody told him. And also, in no way, shape, or form should Norfolk Southern, who was in charge of, and that it was their chemicals on their rail line, on their trains, like it's their responsibility. Should they be like, oh, well, this rando dude that we pulled out of bed in the middle of the night, we told him everything was going to be, it's his fault. He made that decision because you told him to, and he thought you'd be the expert. And then you told him it has to be done now. So tell me what human being wouldn't be like, oh my God, I got to save my little town here. And that's just awful. And they're like, oh no, blame this guy. It's just like in Flint, the state put in, as our director of public works during the water switch, a solar panel installer who told me and everybody else he knows nothing about water. He just did what they told him to do. And it sounded good to him because he was a solar panel installer. So they put people into place to make these decisions to be the fall guys and say, oh no, well, he's director of public works. Well, you're the one who appointed him. You put him in place knowing he installed solar panels, did not deal with water or roads or streets for that matter, or, whatever. But then all of a sudden he's getting hit with charges and stuff too. But then again, he was also ignoring the people, but he was doing what he was told. And again, that's not right, especially when you're putting these people in who are ignorant to the specifics because they don't know. It's not their place to know. Why would a fire chief know about exploding rail cars? Is that part of their training? I don't think so.
Right.
Maybe it is. It should be now, I guess.
I would hope that now it is the case. One last thing I want to get your opinion on, something actually in Michigan. Colin, if we have the article, the federal EPA administrator, Reagan, was in Grand Rapids touting the Biden administration's new, I don't even know what they're calling. I forget. Bidenomics. They're touting Bidenomics. Yes, I'm sure that's making a huge difference. EPA chief visits Grand Rapids, touts federal investments in lead service line replacements. We actually mentioned this earlier on. I almost interrupted you and went into it. Essentially they touted, and Colin, there's one line further down where they're talking about moving cities into the future, like Grand Rapids into the future. I've got the line that they say, together we are working to propel great cities like Grand Rapids into the future with safer, healthier, and more resilient water infrastructure. To me, replacing lead pipes doesn't feel like propelling into the future. It feels like catching up to like 1980 or something.
Yeah. When they figured out lead was bad in gas and, in pipes and stuff, but we just didn't remove them. No, and I don't see them, putting up the money to downsize, right-size the mains. They're not using any kind of green energy there. But what was it, Portland? I believe Portland uses their sewer lines with turbines. Actually, their poop is creating energy, right? So there's actual, futuristic things happening. It's not happening in the state of Michigan. I'll tell you what happened in the state of Michigan. Over 4th of July weekend, there were 18 beaches closed because of bacteria. And that's just the ones I got reported on. 18, because, the Great Lakes state and whatnot. Let's see. We have people getting their water shut off. We have mains exploding in the streets. Flint still has super high lead levels. Yeah, I'm glad he skipped over because I met him. We went down to Cleveland for the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act. And hooray, the Cuyahoga River is no longer on fire all the time. So that's great. Good work done there. So I walked up to him and I said, Mr. Reagan, nice to meet you. I'm Melissa Mays. I am a Flint resident and activist. I continue to get removed. The few times he did come and do a roundtable in Flint, I got removed from the guest list. I don't know why. I'm a treat to be around. But I asked questions. I said, but also the lead service line replacement lawsuit is mine. I'm a named plaintiff in that. We're not done. We need help. And he just wigged out. He didn't wig out. His face just dropped. And I'm like, so we need your help. And the state says it's all you guys' fault. The state's blaming the EPA and you guys are trying to sidestep out the door. We're not finished yet. We still have thousands of homes that have not been finished. And he was like, oh, give my assistant your card. I'm like, okay, so we're not going to see you ever again. That's right. Fine. Well, everybody's lined up to take pictures with him and stuff. I'm like, yo, I just need help. I drove to Cleveland, Ohio for help. So thanks. Stood out in the rain and whatever. But yeah, he skipped. He wasn't far from Benton Harbor. I didn't see him like sliding over to Benton Harbor.
No,
Majority
they'll roll in for their quick photo op. Say that they're, again.
You know that Grand Rapids is DeVos land, so that's the money. Gotta slide in and get that money. And I'm not really a fan of the head of the Environmental Protection Agency stumping for a president, period, because it's supposed to be nonpartisan. It's the planet that's obviously on fire, because the 3rd was the hottest day on the planet in history, so wicked cool. Or not.
Right. And instead of worrying about those very, very real important issues, the EPA is too busy gaslighting residents in East Palestine, lying to them, telling them things are safe, instead of, in the early days, maybe just saying, hey, we don't know yet. What harm would that have been? I've said that so many times. It's just like people, the EPA in East Palestine wonders why people question them so much and have record every single conversation because they have to, and it's because they were lied to initially. If the EPA in the early days was just okay, we're not going to make it mandatory for you to be outside of town right now, but we don't know if it's safe yet, so do with that information what you will. We are trying to get that information, but we don't know what you could be exposed to at this point in time. Imagine how different of a world we'd be living in right now, and the levels of trust that might exist, whereas right now there's none, obviously. I mean, it's a joke. Ugh.
Yeah, and they have done nothing to earn trust, because trust is earned. And that's the same thing. If in May of 2014, after Flint had failed its first, 3 weeks after the water switch, first Safe Drinking Water Act test, it was a violation. Had they come on TV and let people know, hey, look, we're failing these tests for carcinogens, and then a month or two later, lead was already spiking that early on, and said, hey, we're having some issues. This is not working out like we had hoped. Get filters, get, bottled water will help provide some of this or whatever. But we're working on it. We just want you to be safe, and we want you to do what's best for your family, but ultimately the choice is yours. Things would be a lot different. There'd be a lot of people that were alive right now, and there would be a lot of people that would actually maybe trust a little bit more because they were being honest. Because that's something. If you can just say we don't know, but to be safe. Because right now we currently have a mayor that's saying all scientists, all medical professionals, all public health officials say use a filter because construction's going on and we still have high lead. This mayor said you can use a filter if it's comfortable for you. What? Yeah, no, I just want more brain damage. Thanks a lot. Can we just have that then? So, yeah, it's stuff like that. And, of course, the mixed messaging we saw with COVID, too. They should have said, we do not know. Right. It's a new virus. Let's figure this out. But instead, everybody wants to jump to, it's safe to do this. It's safe. Do this, this. Instead of saying, hold on. Stay at home for a little bit until we get this figured out to see what works and what doesn't. We're all in this together, and we're sorry. That's another one, too. We're sorry it's not working out, and we're sorry this is happening, but we are going to be transparent. Whoa. And we're going to tell you what to do. So you have every right to do what you want to do to protect your family, to stay safe. They took away my right when they lied to me and said the water was safe to protect my family. They're taking away East Palestine's right to make informed decisions by hiding the information and lying to them and downplaying it and talking to like they're stupid. A certain professor, who I will not mention, just decided to put a paper out that says directly impacted communities who are searching for social justice hurt themselves more by searching for social justice than just accepting what's happening to them. Yeah. So that broke my brain more than the heavy metals and whatnot. But that's the thing, is when you have experts that are like this, they think they know everything, but also thinking that the impacted community is dumb and taking away their right to make decisions. This is why people die, and this is why people do not trust the government. And that's why you're seeing 1776 flags and all this great, wonderful mess. They did this by just not, treating us like, grown-ups.
Agreed.
Even though not everybody deserves that, let's just say that. But, some people are out of it. But that's their right. And it was my right to know how to protect my family. It's East Palestine's right to know what they're breathing in and drinking and living in and how to protect their families. So. Agreed.
Well, Melissa, thank you so much for taking the time to join me. I really appreciate it. We'll see you again soon. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you.
Bye, Melissa. Alrighty, well, again, big thanks to Melissa as well as Matt from earlier on, UPS worker, member of TDU. We're going to definitely be continuing to stay on both of these stories, obviously. We've been covering East Palestine since February at this point, with multiple on-the-ground trips. We've been covering the UPS story remotely for now, but if the strike ends up being a thing, you can count on Status Coup to be on the ground at UPS Teamsters strikes potentially across the country. Again, you've got myself here in Austin, Texas. We've got Tina in California, John Farina, Jordan in the Northeast. So we are looking to be able to do this. But if we want to be able to do that sort of thing, we need membership. I just noticed this one comment down here that I wanted to read from Jonathan Williams. I wish more people watching Status Coup and reporting on this. Also, if Status Coup subscribers donated $10 a month, Status Coup would have an additional $1.43 million a month in revenue. That would, Colin, I don't know, but I think that would make it so we could be on the ground in a whole lot more places all at once. I'm sure Colin...
At least one extra place.
At least one extra place, yes, yeah. So John couldn't agree more. If you want to become a member, statuscoup.com/join is the place to do it. It is literally how we're able to do all of this. Sure, YouTube ad revenue is a thing, but it's not a reliable thing at all, and it is not a whole lot. It is most of our money comes from you, people-powered media here. We basically are able to do this because of folks like you chipping in as low as $5 a month to be able to help us continue to do this on-the-ground reporting, as well as keep you updated in between with our live show just like this. Again, just last week, Tina and John were on the ground in Atlanta. Just before that, I had a trip in East Palestine. Jordan had been covering, he was in Flint. He's covered some additional strikes and whatnot in between. So between all of us, we're trying to cover as much on the ground as possible. Comment here from Michael, with that kind of budget, Status Coup would go international. Maybe. We'd need that kind of budget to go international, though. That is hard to do. We try to, spend as much time as we can, but we're a small team. So, we've got to focus in on the United States while we can right now. Occasionally we'll dip into something international, but we only have so many resources at this point. But let's go in. We've got one super chat today from Das Bosch Fleisch. Welcome back to 49 euros. Thank you so much, Das Bosch Fleisch. I was actually over in Europe while I was away. I was fortunate enough. I'd been saving up for a little bit. My partner actually had a work conference in Italy. So his flights were all taken care of already. And I was like, you know what? Never a better time than the present. So I was fortunate enough to be able to spend 2 weeks in Italy, which was amazing. So thanks for the welcome back. I'm glad to be back here. You're going to see much more of me again. So missed you all. I was bummed to be away during the NTSB hearings. I was like kind of sneaking, looking at my phone on Twitter because I was trying to, not pay attention to things. But that was big news that Jordan, obviously did a great job breaking down all of that. But it was hard to be away. I wanted to be like there in the room. But there's going to be a whole lot more with that East Palestine story, though. Thank you all so much for watching. Again, big thanks to our guest, Melissa Mays, as well as Matt, the UPS worker from TDU. Thank you all very much for watching. We will see you all soon. Have a great night.